program. So we're going to go ahead and get started. First, we'll start with some introductions. My name is Becca Vogt. I'm the Senior Recruitment Manager here at Immigrant Justice Corps. Looking forward to presenting to you all today. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, John.
Hi, everyone. My name is John Travis, and I am IJC's West Coast Managing Attorney for our Training and Legal Technical Assistance team. And I'm also a former fellow from way back in the class of 2015. It's nice to meet everyone.
Perfect. And then just to let you know, in the background, our recruitment coordinator, Prikshi Lohia, is there helping out with the Q&A portion of things. So we do have a Q&A function probably at the bottom of your screen. So feel free to send, questions during the presentation. If she's able to answer them as we go, she'll do that. If she might wait actually to see if it make more sense to answer your question in the Q&A in a larger setting. So just know that she's in the background helping out, and we're really excited for that Q&A at the end of the presentation. Okay, great. So we're really excited to have you here to talk about IJC's Justice Fellowship. We're currently recruiting for the class of 2027. To give you an idea of what to expect from this presentation, we're going to talk all about Immigrant Justice Corps, what we're all about, introduce you to our theory of change, and of course, describe the Justice Fellowship. We're going to give you that overview of the fellowship itself, our regional model, and the supports available to our fellows throughout their fellowship and beyond. We're also going to talk very thoroughly about the Justice Fellowship application, as that's live now. And if you are eligible and interested in the class of 2027, we'll talk about what we're looking for, what's required, and timeline. Then, of course, like I mentioned, we'll have a Q&A at the end to answer your questions. Great. So our vision at Immigrant Justice Corps is that all immigrants, regardless of status, are treated with dignity and respect and have access to justice. So we see a lot of pathways to this change. Of course, laws need to be reformed to be humane and transparent. Social norms need to be changed to value immigrants within our society. We need a judiciary and administrative system that produces humane jurisprudence and equitable determinations. And where we feel IJC really stands out is that we believe every immigrant should have access to quality legal representation. All of these things work together to hopefully provide meaningful and lasting change. So what do we do at Immigrant Justice Corps? So likely if you're here, you know that immigrants facing threat of deportation or they're pursuing lawful status and citizenship, nothing makes a greater difference than having skilled legal representation. IJC was founded seeing this broken and outdated immigration legal system. And so we work to mobilize quality counsel to help meet the needs of immigrants nationwide. So we do this in a few ways. First, we recruit like we're doing today. We recruit promising, committed new lawyers and college graduates and award them with fellowships that provide an entry point into the field of immigration law. Not only do we provide that entry point, but we support our fellows to become the best immigration advocates possible. We want you to become an expert in immigration law, and we support you with ongoing skills development and support from our network through not only your host organization placement, but as well as beyond as an alumni. We mobilize our fellows. So we're going to talk a bit about this later in the presentation, but we place our fellows with vetted host organizations. These are legal service providers that work in communities providing immigration legal services that have established programs and connections to underrepresented communities. That is where our fellows directly help immigrants in need of legal services. So what is the IJC Justice Fellowship, kind of from a big glance? So our Justice Fellows are recent law graduates. So we define that within 2 years of their law school graduation. And they provide quality representation to immigrant communities in different areas of need. A vast majority of our fellows are working in removal defense representation, whether that's detained or non-detained work. Of course, humanitarian forms of relief. Some of our fellows might represent unaccompanied children, as well as community engagement. So they will work on Know Your Rights campaigns, intakes, pro se application assistance programs, and things like that as well. Our Justice Fellowship is a 2-year fellowship with a secured placement with a partner host organization. And we do have a guaranteed minimum salary of $70,000 a year, as well as benefits. Right, so I keep talking about host organizations. What do I mean by this? So on the right-hand side, you can see some of the organizations we've partnered with more recently, though there's many others in addition to this list. We have the full list actually on our website. There's a section of it around host organizations, but our host organizations are very unique and they tend to vary in a variety of ways. So first, every year, our organizations will vary. This is because organizations do have to apply if they want to host a fellow for the upcoming class, and they're evaluated each year, and certain organizations are awarded to host our fellows in that year's class. So every year our host organizations look different. There is a variety of geographic locations. So we did start in New York back for our inaugural class of 2014, but over the years we have expanded nationally. So we do have a variety of geographic locations where our fellows are placed. There's also a variety of different types of scope of work depending on the organization. Some of our organizations might have a specific client focus, such as youth or domestic violence survivors, things like that. Their populations that they serve obviously vary, as well as sometimes they can be more issue focused. So perhaps this organization works fully in detention, maybe crim-im, asylum, etc. There's also a variety of organizational style, whether it's holistic community or movement lawyering or other sorts of styles of organizations, as well as staffing. We have some really large national organizations with multiple offices throughout the country. And then we have local grassroots organizations as well. So there's a huge variety in size and everything in between for our organizations. There's also variety in salary. So again, we mentioned on the previous slide, IJC guarantees a minimum salary of $70,000 a year, but some of our organizations can offer higher than that, especially if they're in a higher cost of living area. So there are some variations in salary, but would never drop below that minimum. Then, of course, depending on the size of the organization, their resources may vary as well. So that's just another thing to think about. Our fellows have a huge variety of experiences, and it really depends on the organization they're placed with. To give you a sense, I mentioned we started in New York City back with our inaugural class in 2014. But again, we have expanded all throughout the country. So this is just a map showing where our fellows, past and present, have at some point or another or currently are placed. So all the blue states are where we've had a fellow, which is really exciting. And every year we see ourselves expanding more and more. So why IJC? Why this fellowship? So I wanted to give some details about how we support our fellows going into this fellowship and in this work. So as we mentioned, since we've expanded nationally, we realized that our method of support also needed to expand. So we now have a regional model of support. So we've divided the country into 4 different regions: East Coast, New York, Midwest, and West Coast. This looks a little funny maybe with kind of how these sections are laid out, but this is to kind of give an even amount of fellows in each region. So we provide technical support, which John will talk about in a minute. So we have managing attorneys that bring local and regional level expertise to help our fellows with lots of different areas of support. We also have fellowship support. So we have fellowship managers that are also regionally based, and they provide regional programming that could include virtual and when possible in-person events in the region. So we recognize that we've expanded, and so we've done our best to set up this regional model of support so our fellows can have more specialized expertise and support depending on where they are throughout the country. Great, and then I'll talk briefly about our fellowship team. So like I mentioned, we have a team of fellowship managers, as well as our fellowship director that really work in a lot of different areas to support our fellows. First, they really take the lead in community building. So they help host the in-person fall training kickoff. We'll talk more about fall training in a second, but we basically have a month-long fall training, and they are there to help with an in-person component when possible at the beginning of training to have our fellows meet each other in person as they embark on this fellowship. They also help with hosting fellowship office hours, and they lead our wellness and support programming. So we partner with different wellness, mental health service providers, licensed folks that work on wellness guided discussions, as well as sometimes interactive workshops. Here we've listed a few examples of things we've hosted. We've had deconstructing perfectionism the last couple of years. That's been a really helpful guided discussion. We also have discussions and workshops around stress management, secondary trauma, self-care, burnout, setting boundaries, along with other topics. So we really want to make sure we're supporting our fellows as people as they're going through and working in this field. There's also biannual check-ins with fellowship managers. So this is a one-on-one meeting with IJC staff. So you're meeting with your fellowship manager to talk about how things are going, if there's anything you want to bring up or you need additional support around. You do have 2 designated check-ins throughout the year. In each year you have these check-ins. But of course, if you do have something that doesn't align with when the check-in happens to fall, you have a fellowship manager that you're assigned to that you can reach out to at any point to get additional support. They also take the lead with professional mentorship, such as like resumes, helping you look at resumes and thinking about next steps after the fellowship. They do a lot of programming around kind of professional guidance and professional development. They also run our second time bar test taker programming. So if for whatever reason you don't pass the bar on the first attempt, we do have programming to put you in connection with alumni that kind of went through the same thing and passed on a subsequent attempt. And there's a lot more information around that, but we want to support our fellows that are working on the bar for a second time. They also are there and able to connect our fellows with our alumni network for additional support or mentorship, as well as professional development. All right, I'm going to pass it over to John for this slide. Next slide.
Thanks, Becca. So I'll tell you, I'd like to tell you all a little bit about our training and legal technical assistance team and the support that we provide to fellows. Our goal is really to provide you all with the substantive legal training and the support that you need to be the best immigration advocates that you can be. Most of our team consists of past fellows who have been practicing for between 6 to 10 years. And we all remember what it was like to be new to the practice, to be an attorney in your first job, and so we really want to try to give you all the tools that you need to be good at your job, to represent your clients, and to succeed. And so how we accomplish this is starting off with our fall training programming. That is a 3 to 4 week intensive training that we do at the beginning of the fellowship. We typically will fly folks to New York for the first week of training, where we have some substantive trainings and some team building activities, maybe a few field trips. After that, we transition into a fully remote fall training where everybody goes back to their home bases, and we continue the trainings where we really recruit some of the top experts in the field to come give everyone a pretty comprehensive overview on all areas of immigration law. So we don't just seek to focus on the areas of immigration law that you might be working on at your host organizations, but really we try to equip you all with a very comprehensive skill set covering most forms of relief and different areas that you might encounter in representing clients. Outside of fall training, we offer a training every month on a different area of immigration law. We typically develop these as we go along, and so we try to adapt them to things that are going on in the field at the moment. And again, trying to recruit trainers from our alumni network, or folks that work at supervisors that work at our host organizations, to really give you all up to date information on the latest developments. Certainly in the past year or two, we've been seeing a number of different changes in immigration law. The pace has been really intense in terms of how quickly things are changing in the field. And so we try to address those through trainings and also through through um, one-on-one consultations with you all. So if you are working on an issue that perhaps your supervisor at your host organization doesn't have experience with, you could set up a meeting with one of our managing attorneys, talk to them about your legal issue, and then they can give you advice, point you in the right direction, provide you with a sample, and just kind of do everything we can to help answer your question. We also, in the spring, generally, we put together a trial skills workshop where we come up with a mock problem that everyone will study, and then we bring you all in for a virtual mock hearing with some of our folks from our alumni network to play judges, to play DHS attorneys, and it really allows folks to kind of develop some courtroom skills in a learning environment. Some other training examples of trainings that we do are trainings on legal writing, trainings on representing unaccompanied minors. We also have a legal resources library where we put together a lot of different samples that we've collected over the years and different resources. And then finally, every 2 weeks, we have case rounds discussion where fellows can come, bounce ideas off of each other, talk about cases that they're working on, different challenges that they're encountering, and we try to point folks in the right direction and offer advice. Yeah, like I said, pretty much everyone on our team, we're about 5 to 10 years into practice. We were all supervisors at one point or another, and we all really specialize in helping first and second year attorneys gain the skills they need to succeed.
Great. Thank you so much, John. Really appreciate you going through everything TLTA provides for our fellows. Okay, great. Then just some final notes of other supports that we provide to fellows. Some of these are based on need and subject to available funds, but we like to mention them. So we typically have a bar exam and preparation reimbursement. This is basically financial support up to $2,500 for bar exam preparation courses or state bar exam fees. We know it's a very high barrier to take the bar exam and to get into immigration law. So this is a support we're really proud that we're able to provide. We also have support for our documented fellows, including payment of renewal fees, as well as a signing bonus of $2,000 for all Justice Fellows, just to show our excitement that you're joining us for the upcoming class. It's great. So we just wanted to show just a few pictures of events that have happened over the past few years, especially. So we have a lot of opportunities to engage our fellows in person when we can. So this includes in the upper left-hand corner is actually our alumni convening, where we're able to bring together alumni into New York for some CLE credits and just community building. We also have some pictures of fall trainings in the past. On the right-hand side was the class of 2024, I believe. We have had panelist discussions, other fall training photos in here as well. So I feel like one of the big things about the Justice Fellowship is that sense of community and being connected to other folks that are, part of this work and having that support system. I think these pictures are very powerful representations of that. Okay, great. So that why IJC question. So we really believe a fellowship with IJC is the next best step in your career to be the best immigration advocate possible. As you heard, we have trainings, wellness, professional support, as well as regional experts that are just crucial, I believe, to sustaining your work as an immigration advocate while becoming an expert in the field. Kind of like I mentioned, you'd be joining a community of passionate, like-minded individuals that also have a commitment to expanding access to immigrant justice. And we have several hundred alumni fellows, as well as your cohort that you'd be a part of and the cohort before you that you would be connected to, and they would serve as a resource not only during your fellowship, but beyond in your career. All right, so we're going to now turn to talking about the Justice Fellowship application, all the nuts and bolts of what to expect if you are either applying this year or perhaps in a future cycle. So eligibility is where we're going to start. So for our Justice Fellows, applicants can be currently enrolled in a JD or LLM program as long as they graduate law school by the spring of the fellowship start year. So for example, this upcoming class of 2027 that the application is open for, if you graduate in spring of 2027, you would be eligible to apply for this upcoming class. We also have applicants are eligible if they've already graduated from a JD or LM program. It's up to 2 years prior to the start of the fellowship. So you can be up to 2 years post-graduation. So for this year's class, you would have to have graduated no earlier than spring of 2025. At the time of selection, applicants must be eligible for work authorization in the US for the full 2 years of the fellowship. And then we put this here, though it's not a requirement or eligibility, but we get asked this a lot. IJC fellows often will speak a second language in addition to English, but this is not an eligibility requirement to apply. We encourage you to apply regardless of language ability. So who are we looking for in fellows throughout this application and selection process? So we're really trying to find fellows that are thoughtful, compassionate, and empathetic. Our fellows are working with folks that have been through really hard, unimaginable things. So having those qualities are really important for client work. We also look for fellows that are creative, of course, dedicated to immigrant justice, also committed to the idea of a fellowship program. We have a prompting question in, I believe, our statement of interest of, why a fellowship program over a staff attorney role? We want to understand why you're looking for a fellowship after graduation. Ideally, our fellows speak another language in addition to English, but overall, we are looking for fellows that want to pursue a future working in the field of immigration law long term. So what are the elements of the application that we ask for? So we have an application form that gets at some of your basic contact information, what law school you go to, your expected, or what term your degree was conferred in, your bar exam plans, things like that. We also ask about some of your experiences and class work that you've had. So you'll see some of that within the application form where you can highlight. We also ask for your geographic interest and placement, just to get a sense of where you're hoping to be placed if you were selected and matched with an organization. So that's the application form. Next is a resume. We ask for that to be 1 to 2 pages maximum, just kind of giving us an overview of what you've been working on and any relevant information you think we should have about what's prepared you for this fellowship. We do ask for an unofficial law school transcript, so it does not have to be official, but if you have had multiple law schools, we do ask for transcripts from basically all of your law school coursework available. We also have a statement of interest, which is 500 words or less. This is where you get to tell us, why are you interested in becoming a fellow? This is really where you can shine and tell us why you believe this would be the best fit for your next steps. We also have an essay question, so we encourage you to read the prompt thoughtfully. This is just letting us see how you think and what's important to you. You'll see that in the prompt. This is also 500 words or less, and we also are able to evaluate your writing skills. So really be sure to pay attention, proofread, and all of those good things. Then the last thing we ask for are 2 letters of recommendation. So what are some tips about the application process? So we really encourage you, the application has opened now, it's live, we'll talk more about that in a moment, but if you haven't already, start the application so you can see all of these components and what's needed. We do have a deadline in October, it's October 18th this year, and we're not going to review applications until after that date. So you have a lot of time, but we really encourage you to gather those application components, see what you need to do so that you can complete it on your schedule, but you definitely need to do it, of course, by the deadline to be considered. Another tip is just proofread, 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 and then perhaps get a second pair of eyes to proofread. You'd be maybe surprised by how many applications, we've read over the years where there's just some basic, spelling or grammar mistakes. A very common mistake we see as well is, our acronym for Immigrant Justice Corps is IJC, but we'll see ICJ a lot. So make sure that you look at all those little details, it really does stand out to us in the review process. We really encourage you. We've tried to create this application to allow you to really highlight your experiences in immigration law, as well as this is a direct service fellowship. So you're going to be working directly with clients. So if you have any experience working with clients, as well as any other public interest work, we want to understand what you've been working on and how that's prepared you for the fellowship. We encourage you to get as personal and as thoughtful as you are comfortable. We really want to understand why you're dedicated to this work, especially in the long term. As far as recommendation letters, we really encourage you to choose recommenders that know you best and can express that familiarity. We get questions a lot of like, who should I be picking for my recommenders? We can talk more about that in the Q&A as well. But it's really, you can tell the difference very quickly around a recommender that has known you or has mentored you, has seen you work perhaps in immigration or public interest, and can really talk to what you're passionate about and the things that you've accomplished. Versus maybe perhaps just like a professor you had in your 1L year that maybe you didn't interact with as much later. Of course, any recommendation is great to get to know you better, but if you do have those recommenders that know you very well, we'd recommend that you reach out to them, though we do say only academic or professional recommendations, no personal recommendations. Going along with recommendation tips, gently remind them of the deadline. Their deadline is also your deadline. So if we've not received it, that means by that deadline of October 18th, that means your application may not be considered. So please be sure to give them plenty of time to submit on your behalf, give them plenty of notice, and gently remind them if you see in the portal that it hasn't been uploaded yet. If they're having any issues technically with getting a letter uploaded, they can always email us at the recruitment@justicecorps.org email. We'll have that later on in this presentation as well. We will ask about your language abilities, so we encourage you don't overplay or underplay your language abilities, but tell us if you plan to work on it. We have hopefully a really good self-assessment scale that we're going to ask you to complete for any languages that you mention. So just kind of pay attention to what those categories are, and you can always provide more context. We have open-ended area like questions that you can give us more context for your language abilities. Then, of course, again, be mindful of the timeline. That deadline is a hard deadline. So really be sure that you get everything in by the deadline. And speaking of timelines, here's an overview of our application and selection process timeline for this year's cohort. So the application just opened in July and it's going to close, like I mentioned, on Sunday, October 18th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. So that is a hard deadline, so really make sure that you get started early enough to know what you need to submit and submit on time. Keep in mind that Eastern time versus, say you're on the West Coast, kind of keep track of what that looks like for your region. After the application closes, we have a selection committee of stakeholders that will gather to review all of the applications we've received. From there, we are provided recommendations on who should move forward to the next step of the selection process, which is an interview. So IJC staff are going to schedule an interview with those prospective fellows that were recommended by the committee. Those interviews are typically conducted in November. And then from there, after the interviews conclude, we also receive recommendations on who to move forward as a finalist. We also often have a wait list but basically all of those folks that are still engaged in the application process will know their status after the conclusion of all of the interviews. We then will go into what we call the matching process for our finalists, prospective fellows. We're going to talk more about that in just a second. And that is where we figure out, where you might be potentially matched with which host organization. All right, so our matching process will start in December and typically will close by February. We often have more than one round of matching, just depending on the year. We typically have 2, sometimes 3, but our goal is by February of 2027, all of the matches are completed and we've extended offers to the new class of Justice Fellows that have matched with an organization. And then, of course, there's typically plenty to keep you busy throughout the spring semester. Most folks are graduating, finishing up their final semester of law school, preparing for that bar exam in July. And then you would start with us in September of 2027 with the new class of Justice Fellows with that fall training we mentioned. All right, so let's talk more about the matching process. I think I saw a couple Q&A questions already come in wanting to know more about how do you know what organization you might be matched with. So we kind of have different stages of the matching process. Basically, if you are selected as a finalist, we would send you a list of all of the available placements for the year. So that would be all of the organizations, exactly what address you would, show up to, whether it's in person fully or hybrid. They typically will talk about their scope of work, so you have an idea of the types of things you might work on if you were placed as a justice fellow with them. And they also have information around bar admission, salary, because again, we have a guaranteed minimum salary, but if they do offer higher, that's when you would find out those ranges. As well as benefit informations. So our fellows become employees of their host organizations. That's why we include all of the benefits information as well, because that will vary depending on the organization. From there, our finalists let us know at IJC what organizations they would be open to working with. So you'll provide that information to us. We go into a lot more detail in a matching webinar for our finalists, but you would let IJC know who you'd be open to working with, as well as the strength of your interest in working with those organizations, as well as who you're not open to working with. So we would never try to match you with an organization that you are not open to working with. You would let us know not to consider you for those organizations. From there, we pass on your candidate information. This includes a statement of interest we've asked you to prepare along with your resume. And our host organizations look at any candidates that express interest in their placement, and they do a similar process back, letting us at IGC know, like, hey, these are the candidates we're really open to working with. We're really excited about that. Or maybe these are candidates that, might not be a best fit for our placement at this time. Then from there, part 3 is matching. So this is when IJC comes in and we look at what our finalists have shared about their preferences for placement, as well as what our host organizations have shared as far as preferences for candidates. And that's where we try to find tentative matches. So basically, it's based on the strength of interest in working with one another. And we try to balance our finalist needs and our host organization's needs in that process. But if we have a tentative match, we will send a tentative offer between you and that organization, connecting you with them, letting you know this is a tentative offer of placement. Both parties are included in this email. And you'll have about a week to meet and talk, ask questions. We always say prepare for an interview process with them. Sometimes they're a little bit more relaxed than that, but folks will want to meet you and get to know you even better. And after you have that time to meet with one another, we ask both parties to accept or decline the placement. So if you accept the placement and they accept the placement, that means it was a successful match and you'd be officially invited to become a Justice Fellow for the upcoming class. So that's kind of a long-winded explanation of the matching process, but of course, happy to clarify further in the Q&A. Right, so I know that was a lot of information. Like I mentioned, the application is open now. This QR code will take you there. But of course, you can go through our website, or there's the direct link there. As a reminder, applications for this upcoming class of 2027 will close on October 18th of 2026 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. Okay, great. And now we're going to move into the Q&A. Like I mentioned, and also we're recording this, so we'll send this recording to everyone that's registered. So maybe you're not able to watch it live, but if you do have any follow-up questions that we didn't get to or something you think of after, always feel free to reach out to recruitment@justicecorps.org, this email on the screen. Okay, great. So I do see we have a lot of Q&A questions that have come up. Okay, great. See a couple common kind of similar questions. So we have a question, is the current list of host organizations on IJC's website the finalized list for 2027? We also have questions about specific states. We have Nebraska. I think I answered a question earlier about Iowa. So our host organization application actually runs concurrently a bit. It closes a little bit earlier than the Justice Fellow application. So we do not have our 2027 host organizations finalized yet. We should have them finalized by the time we're done with the application review process. So what happens is, say we review applications, the committee suggests, hey, your application, we really encourage this candidate to move forward to interview, and say you've listed a state where we now know that we won't have an organization available. We would reach out to you to let you know that we'd like to invite you to an interview. However, we do not have an organization for this upcoming class in this state, so that you could decide if you want to move forward with the process or withdraw. So Hopefully we'll have a good variety. We typically do each year of organizations. We know folks have those specific preferences or requirements of geography, but our application process is currently open for host organizations, so we don't have our finalized list at this time. The host organization application closes the end of September, and then we have a few weeks of review before we can finalize the organization. So that's why it typically happens after the application review process for Justice Fellows has concluded, but before the interview process. So you can consider if you want to move forward or not, depending on if we have your specific state available. I hope that helps. So what's on IJC's website is the historical host organizations, not the 2027 organizations. Another question about host organizations. What criteria is needed for host organizations? How does IJC prioritize their reach of needs through the fellows based on which host organizations they partner with? So great question. So part of the host organization review process is we focus on a few things. It depends each year, but typically we're really interested in what will our fellow be working on? What is the gap in representation that the organization has expressed, a need for a fellow to fill to really help close that gap. And so each year we sometimes have different focuses depending on what we're seeing. For example, last year we had a lot of demand for detention representation. So a large chunk of our 2026 class will be working with detained clients. So that's a need we saw, and that's where we selected organizations based off that, though it's not entirely detention work. As another big piece is supervision. We really want to make sure our fellows have really good supervision at their organization. So we really consider who's the proposed supervisor, their experience, things they've worked on, as well as their capacity for supervision. We look at a lot of different things, but just know when we review the host organizations, it's very intentional, it's very thoughtful. That's why it takes many weeks to get through that review process. And each year it can shift depending on kind of priorities, what we're seeing around the country, but we really try to be intentional and specific to make sure that we're selecting the best organizations possible for our fellows. I hope that helps. Oh, here's a great question I wanted to answer live. So the question is, when are fellows notified of their host orgs? Just wondering if there's enough time between notification and bar exams in case fellows get accepted into jurisdictions where they weren't planning on being barred. Also, do you recommend only applying to states where prospective fellows are planning on taking the bar? So this is a great question. So our goal, again, is to be done with matching fully by the essentially beginning of February. So hopefully that would be plenty of time. If you are matched with an organization, you'd be able to see their bar preferences or requirements as part of the matching process, and hopefully have enough time to sign up for that state bar exam if needed, because it's a little bit earlier in the process. We actually try to finish round one of matching by kind of like end of December, early January. So there's even more time with round one. But if you are selected as a finalist, again, you'll have that spreadsheet of information with all of the organizations and all of those requirements or preferences for bar exam. So definitely look at that, very carefully. So say you weren't, you're not interested in being barred in that specific state. It might follow that you're not interested in that geography necessarily, but really use that as part of your decision making if that's important to you in the matching process. We don't know how our finalists prioritize, who they're interested in working with or not. But if that's important to you, which I know it would be for most folks to ensure, you're being barred in the jurisdiction that makes sense for the placement, use that as a tool as you're determining what placements you might be open to, or perhaps the placements you're not open to. So hopefully that helps with that timeline. Hopefully you'd have plenty of time to, if you needed to change your plans, but perhaps they would align with the plans that you're already making. It just really depends on the organizations each year. Great. Great. I see Richie's been able to answer a few along the ways. Let's see. Here's another question that came in. Apologies if you already discussed this. How extensive are the statements of interest specific to the organization's work, and when they are submitted. So how many statements do applicants typically write? So I'm assuming this is reference to the matching process when I mentioned that organizations that you're interested in their placements for, we'd send a statement of interest you've prepared as well as your resume. So in that, we actually limit your word count so it doesn't feel as overwhelming. There's often a lot of choices. So I believe our word count is maybe 200 words or less. So it doesn't need to be like a cover letter, but it's really your opportunity to get specific about the organization, why you're really interested in working with them. You can talk about, what appealed to you as part of their host organization profile. We do sometimes have candidates, it's up to you how you want to do this. So of course you're probably ranking multiple organizations. Some folks kind of use the same one and just kind of shift a few details, but some folks write completely, unique ones for each organization. It's really up to you, but you would have that flexibility for each specific organization to tell us exactly what you want us to share with them in that statement. So hopefully that's helpful. So technically, as far as like how many statements do applicants typically write, for that process, you would write a statement for every organization you are interested and open to working with. You would not obviously have to write a statement for any organizations you tell us you're not interested in. So it just depends on how many organizations you'd be interested in working with, but you'd have to write one for each of those. Okay. Another great question, how many Justice Fellow applicants have you received in the last few years in a cycle? And then how many fellows does IJC fund? So this also varies each year. I would say we usually receive over 250 applications each year. It really depends on the year. And each year our funding also varies. I will share that this upcoming class we're anticipating will be similar to last year's class, which is between 25 to 30 fellows for the class. Great question. Another wonderful question, would the fellowship be a good fit for someone that has experience as a DOJ accredited representative? Absolutely, absolutely. So if you're not aware, we actually have a fellowship for graduates that's called the Community Fellowship, and this is related to the DOJ accreditation program. But if you do have experience as a DOJ accredited rep, before or during law school, whatever that looks like, it's such a helpful experience because you've worked with clients. You really are understanding different areas of immigration law already and practiced in them a bit. So this is a great fit. If now you've gone on to law school and you're looking now to become, an immigration attorney post-graduation, or maybe you've already graduated and you're wanting to become an immigration attorney in these first couple of years of practice, it is a great fit. You've had a lot of great experience leading up to this. Okay, great. We'll see if any other questions come up. I know I see that Perky's been able to answer a few of them behind the scenes. Hopefully you're seeing those responses as well. Let me see if there's any that we've answered that would be helpful to answer out loud if it's helpful for those folks on the recording. Yeah, a great question around, are there any organizational capacities for crimmigration matters or all project civil and or direct services? So we have a lot of fellows that actually do work at that intersection of criminal and immigration law and that crimmigration practice. So we do have many fellows that do that. Each year there's at least a handful, I want to say, that often are working at that intersection. But it is all direct service work. So it would be representing clients at that intersection. We often will partner with defenders organizations and things like that. I'm sure you can kind of see a list of those sorts of organizations on our website, but that's definitely a possibility. Again, it comes down to the final selection of host organizations each year, if that's kind of the breakdown. But crimmigration is a common thing we've had fellows work on each year. Great. And we do have a question about the training, that fall training. So how long is the initial in-person training and is it in New York City? So the fall training is typically that 3 to 4 weeks in total, but we do have that, typically it's a little less than a week. But the first week of the training, we typically do try to bring our fellows in person. It does shift each year. Commonly, it's in New York City. One year we had it in Montgomery, Alabama, so it can change, but typically it's in New York. And we do, bring our fellows in for that in-person period. It's usually like 2 or 3 full days of time together with that community building, some of the trainings we do in person, and kind of an orientation. And then our fellows, after the conclusion of that in-person component, of course, go kind of back to where they are, and they resume fall training remotely for the rest of the training. So the next, 2-ish to 3-ish weeks. So hopefully that's helpful to give a sense of how fall training looks. Great, we have 2 more questions have come in. So have you ever had, or do you expect this year to have a host organization in Rhode Island? So to my knowledge, I do not believe we've had a Rhode Island organization, but I mentioned this, I think, in a reply to a different comment. I think I typed it though, so I might not have said it out loud, but we're always welcoming of new host organizations, organizations that maybe we've never heard of to apply. So if you know of a legal service provider, they do need to be a nonprofit that does immigration legal services, and you think they might be a good fit for the fellowship. Perhaps you've interned there or have connections there. That's super helpful. Talk to them about this opportunity. We do have, like I mentioned, the host organization application actually opened this week. So it is live, and their application is due, I believe it's Sunday, September 27th. So if you do need more assistance with getting that application to that organization, you can always, again, reach out to us at this recruitment@justicecorps.org email, and we can help provide that link. It should be on our website as well. I will double check that that link is on there as well for our host orgs. But we're always welcome to new applications. Again, I can't guarantee what the selection would be for this upcoming year, but we're always welcome for nonprofit legal service providers that provide immigration legal services to apply. Okay, another great question. Is there an opportunity for applicants to connect with prior or current fellows during the application process? Is this encouraged? So that's a great question. So I don't feel like we typically facilitate that connection through IJC. I've definitely seen throughout application processes that perhaps a applicant knows a former or current IJC fellow. Perhaps they went to your law school or something like that, and so they've been able to connect and ask questions. So we definitely encourage you, if you have those connections, of course, talk with folks about their experiences, connect with them. That's absolutely, we want you to use your resources to their full potential. We haven't directly connected, say, an applicant that doesn't have that connection to someone, but if you do want to reach out, you can always reach out to our recruitment inbox. We can see how feasible that might be. But yeah, if you do have that connection, please feel free to talk with folks about their experience, the application process, and also just know we are an open book. If you have questions that you want to ask us and the recruitment team, we want to make sure you have the strongest application possible. We want you to make our lives hard with moving forward through the selection process because of how high of a quality application you've submitted. So always feel free to talk with us as well. Okay, another question. During the 2-year fellowship, does the organization offer accommodation if you're placed in another state? Does it also provide a health insurance package during that period? So definitely follow up with more clarification if I'm misunderstanding your question. But if you are placed with an organization, say outside of the state that you resided in, so that would mean relocation to that particular state to do this work, then some organizations, we do ask as part of that matching process if they help with relocation assistance. I will say overwhelmingly, most organizations do not provide relocation assistance, but some might have some programs. So you can look at that on the matching spreadsheet. But since this type of work, is so client-based, I would say 99% of the time, our organizations are either hybrid in their model. So you'd only be going into the office a couple days out of the week, and they share their policy in that matching document. or they are fully in person. We have had a very rare fully remote model. It's very rare for us to approve that, but that organization in particular has it set up very, very well. Not sure if they would be selected again this year, but more than likely, if you are indicating interest in an organization outside of where you're currently located, you would need probably 99% of the time to fully relocate to be near that organization. And whether or not they can assist with costs of relocation would be something you could review during that matching process. They would share if they do have that available or not. As far as the second part, do they provide health insurance packages? Yes, part of our host organization evaluation process is we require host organizations to offer access to health insurance. Again, these policies are different based on organizations, whether you have, you have to pay partially for your coverage, things like that. That would also be on your that matching spreadsheet. You can consider the different methods and like setups for organizations. But yes, health insurance is something that we require organizations to offer to our fellows. I hope that helps. Great. So another question that's come in, do you have a support system for applicants who are persons living with disabilities? So we do have a great support system through our fellowship team. And definitely if there's any accommodations you need to reach out to us about the application process, always feel free again to email that recruitment general inbox. But we would definitely do our best to provide any supports or accommodations to the best of our ability. So definitely feel free to reach out if you have a more personal question to that email, and we'd be happy to answer there. Great. Another question, how many host organizations do you usually accept in every cycle? And is a fellow placed in every host organization? Can one host org host more than one fellow during the same cycle? So this is a great question. So the number of host organizations we accept obviously will rely on the funding we have each year for the class size. So I kind of mentioned we anticipate between 25 to 30 fellows in this upcoming year's class. So that would mean at maximum, we could either have between 25 and 30 host organizations, with perhaps every organization having one fellow. There are times where we place two fellows at one organization. It's not a common occurrence, just due to our limited funding. We try our best to spread out that funding when possible for more opportunities and more organizations to be part of the class. But it does happen. We often have, at least one or maybe two organizations that might have two fellows coming in that class. But as far as can one host org host more than one fellow during the same cycle? So it's either that pairing potentially, or perhaps they hosted a fellow from the previous cycles. They have a rising second year when their new fellow would start. So there can also be overlap between classes. We don't have any limitations on, the number of fellows. Again, I also mentioned like we have the community fellowship. Organizations can also have a community fellow as well as a justice fellow. We do see that happen. So there's no limitations on organizations, but the number each cycle would depend, of course, on the funding. We kind of choose from there. Again, we try to spread it out. It just depends each year. So we'll see how many organizations we have. But at most, if it's that 25 to 30, then it'd be 25 to 30 host organizations. And again, perhaps there's a doubling up somewhere. So that would, bring down that total number of organizations, that class, because there's two at one placement, if that makes sense. Right. Wonderful. These have been really great questions. Thank you so much for sending them in. I think I've answered all the open questions. I'm just going to look through the ones we answered to double check. Of course, if you have any last minute questions, feel free to submit those before we sign off. We have about 5 minutes left. I think I've answered all the open questions so far. Wonderful. One thing that wasn't asked, though, like I kind of mentioned in the presentation, we often get asked is around recommenders and who to choose for recommendations. So kind of like I mentioned, again, if they can express their familiarity with you, your passion, your work product, perhaps working with clients, anything around that. It's a really helpful recommendation letter for us to read to get to know you better. So my perspective when I read a recommendation letter is I want to get to know this candidate from someone else's perspective. How can I get to know them better? Of course, I've just gotten to know you through all the application materials you've submitted, but who would someone that you've worked with, either in an academic setting or a professional setting, describe you and your work ethic and your passion for this type of work or working with clients? How can I get to know you better from their perspective? So if you can find a recommender that can express that, perhaps it's a clinic professor. Perhaps you were able to take an immigration clinic at your law school and they've seen the work you've done, perhaps on a case throughout the semester. That is super helpful information. Perhaps it's an internship. Again, it doesn't have to be in the field of immigration, but that can be really helpful since that's, of course, the focus of this fellowship is immigration and direct services. But we just want to get a sense of who you are, what you've worked on, and how someone else can help us get to know you better. So that's just something I wanted to mention since it wasn't brought up. Oh, here's a question that just came in around letters of rec. Thank you so much for submitting. So the question is, for letters of recommendation, would two different people you have worked with in the same setting be okay? Or better to have recommenders across a few different experiences? So this is a great question. I would again default to, do they know you best? I would say if you have a third or fourth option of recommender that perhaps is a slightly different setting, it could be helpful. But if you feel like that third or maybe fourth recommender couldn't speak as clearly, then I would again default to the recommenders that can speak most familiarly about you and your work. So we have seen it before. There's perhaps two clinic professors that you worked with on a clinic, and maybe this professor helped with this case you're working on, this professor helped with this other piece, and so they can describe you perhaps from two different perspectives of the same experience. That is definitely super useful. If it felt like really, I don't know, if it felt like you think it'll be too repetitive, then maybe look for that alternative. But again, default to who would know you best. I think that would be really helpful. Great. Another question for letters of recommendation, can two people that I worked with in the same setting submit one letter of recommendation submitted by both? So yes, we have seen this where kind of that same example where perhaps there's two clinic professors and they've kind of done a joint letter that is allowable. But again, you would have to have that second letter of recommendation as well. This is allowable because that recommendation, is of course just one recommendation from two voices. They're both signing off on the same experience. So that would be fine. But again, you'd have to still have a second separate letter recommendation from someone else. So we have had that. It's not as common. I would say we typically see separate ones, but we have seen that in the past and we do allow that as long as you have, again, a full second letter recommendation. You can't just rely on the one letter that has two signatures, if that makes sense. Hopefully that helps. Right, well, we're approaching the top of the hour. If there are any questions that come up that you are thinking about after the fact, or perhaps you're watching a copy of this recording and we didn't get to your question, again, always feel free to reach out to us at our recruitment inbox. We'd be happy to talk with you. I will mention that in October, we will have a webinar that isn't going over this information, but it's actually about the application process. And basically our tips and tricks, we go into a lot more detail through every piece of material that is required on our application. We give you our insider tips of how to strengthen that. So we will announce that that date of when that will be occurring. It will be sometime in October. Usually it's about a week or so before the deadline. So folks that are finishing up their applications can strengthen their applications and get those submitted on time. So we really encourage you to join us for that if you're applying for this year's class or if you're applying for a future class and just want to get a sense of what to expect in a future cycle. So look out for that October webinar. We really appreciate you spending your time with us today, and we really hope you have a great rest of your day. Great. Take care. Thank you so much.